Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into uh, a challenge that I think resonates with so many language learners out there.
hmm
You know, you're putting in the work, you're studying the vocabulary, you're grappling with grammar rules, maybe you're actually getting pretty good at reading and listening.
Yeah, the passive skills often come first.
Exactly. But then comes that moment you need to actually speak, and well, if you don't have someone right there with you to practice with, it can feel like you've just hit this impossible wall.
Right.
How can you possibly improve your speaking when you're just by yourself? It's a really common, and honestly, it's a frustrating feeling, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling is completely valid and it's incredibly widespread. So many learners, they get this impression that real-time interactive conversation with another person, ideally a native speaker, right, is the only way to get fluent.
That's the dream scenario everyone pictures.
It is. And look, that kind of practice is undeniably valuable, no question. But the source material we're digging into today offers a really powerful counter-argument to thinking that's the only way.
Okay.
It presents a pretty compelling case, actually, and it's backed up with practical methods that not having that dedicated speaking partner.
Well, it doesn't have to stop you from making significant progress in your spoken English.
Exactly. And that's like the absolute core, the real aha moment that this source gives you right at the start.
Mhm.
It highlights that, contrary to that common belief, a lot of successful English learners have reached really impressive levels of fluency and confidence, too, without always having dedicated practice partners.
Yeah, they found other ways.
And the secret, this material suggests, it isn't some magic talent or just getting lucky. It's about using smart, consistent, and actually highly effective techniques you can do, well, on your own.
Yes, the source is very direct about tackling that myth. It basically says, look, stop waiting around for the perfect partner.
Yeah.
You know?
And instead, it gives you the tools to become your own most effective practice partner. It makes it really clear that practicing independently, if you approach it strategically, isn't just some, second best option. It can actually be a powerful way to accelerate your spoken English skills.
Okay, so for this deep dive then, our mission, our goal, is to really carefully pull out all of that practical advice and, just as importantly, the why behind it from this source material.
Understanding the mechanics.
Yeah. So by the time we wrap up, our aim is that you, the listener, will have a clear, actionable blueprint. You'll get not just what techniques to use, but why they work and how they can genuinely help you build that fluency and confidence, even if you're the only person speaking English in the room.
Right.
We're going to explore how it's actually possible to practice speaking effectively solo, the specific hands-on techniques, the source highlights for building fluency.
Things you can actually do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actionable stuff. Insights from the source on how you can even self-correct your pronunciation and grammar without immediate feedback from someone else.
Which is a big question for many people.
Huge. And crucially, ways to make this solo practice engaging and really effective. And all of this is drawn entirely from what this source is telling us.
Think of it like this. The source gives you the building blocks, the foundational pieces, to create your own complete, flexible practice routine.
Okay.
It really empowers you to take control, take agency over your speaking development. You're not sort of dependent on someone else's schedule or whether they're available.
Well, you're not waiting by the phone,
With-
metaphorically speaking.
Exactly. You'll have this set of proven methods ready to go, methods you can use to make progress anytime, anywhere. It genuinely shifts the whole mindset from needing an external person to really leveraging your own abilities and your own environment.
It sounds like turning what feels like a limitation into a real opportunity just by using these methods that, well, this material says have worked for lots of others.
That's the idea.
So let's get right into it. Let's start building that blueprint by exploring the specific methods this source lays out.
Okay, let's dive into those techniques. Where does the source start?
Okay, so jumping right into the specifics.
Yeah.
The methods this source details for practicing speaking when you're completely on your own. The material kicks off with a technique it describes as maybe the easiest and most effective method of the bunch.
Ah, yes. And it's the one that, it might sound a little odd at first,
Definitely.
just talking to yourself.
Yeah.
The source is quite upfront about it, right? It acknowledges immediately it sounds funny. And let's be honest, it can feel a bit awkward when you first try it, like you're performing a one-person play to an empty room.
Totally. I can picture myself doing it and feeling a bit silly.
But the source quickly adds, but it actually helps a lot. And then it gives some really compelling reasons why that is.
It definitely conjures up some images, doesn't it? Muttering to yourself while you make breakfast or narrating your commute.
Mm-hmm.
But this material really argues strongly that this isn't just, quirky behavior. It's actually a powerful tool for language learning.
It really does. The core benefit, as the source puts it, is that it trains your brain to think directly in English. Now, this is absolutely vital for fluency.
Okay, thinking in English.
Exactly. The source correctly points out a huge hurdle for many learners, that tendency to think in their native language first and then try to translate to English.
The translation step, yeah.
That internal translation process, it's incredibly slow, it's inefficient, it's like trying to, I don't know, run a sprint while constantly stopping to look up words in a dictionary.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So instead of your thought process being like, okay, I need coffee in native language. Now you think, no, I need coffee.
Yeah.
It's I need coffee in English.
Right.
You're training your brain to just cut out that middle step. It becomes more like, need coffee, the concept. Me say, I need coffee in English.
Exactly that. You're building a direct connection, a direct neural pathway between the concepts, the ideas, the actions, and how you express them in English without taking that detour through your first language.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the how, the way the source suggests you do this, is remarkably simple, and it fits really easily into your daily life. It recommends just narrating your everyday actions as you're doing them.
Like giving a running commentary on washing the dishes.
Precisely that. The source gives these very practical, very down-to-earth examples. Like when you first wake up, instead of just thinking about getting up, you might say out loud, okay, I'm getting out of bed.
Right.
As you go through your morning routine, you just add little lines like, now I'm brushing my teeth. Or maybe as you're deciding what to wear, you could actually articulate that internal debate. What should I wear today?
These are such a simple sentences, though. Things everyone does. It almost feels too easy.
Well, that's part of the beauty of it, according to the source. By starting with these really simple everyday actions, you're getting practice forming basic English sentences that are directly related to your immediate reality. It's accessible.
Okay.
And the source also suggests you can extend this to talking about your plans for the day. So planning your schedule out loud. Like, okay, first I need to.
Yes, exactly like that. The source gives examples like, today I have a meeting at work. Or perhaps, I need to prepare a report and then go grocery shopping.
Okay, those are a little more complex, maybe using future ideas or things like need to.
Right. They involve slightly more complex structures, maybe future tense or modal verbs like need to, have to, will. But they are still very much grounded in your personal context, things you're actually doing or planning. That makes them easier to access mentally and then actually say out loud.
And the source really seems to hammer home the main principle here.
Yeah.
The key is to speak naturally, like you're narrating your day. It's not about trying to construct these grammatically perfect, complex sentences or showing off advanced vocabulary. It's just about getting the words out, practicing the actual mechanics of forming sentences on the fly.
And the material gives a very clear explanation for why this kind of natural, simple narration is so effective. It says this practice forces your brain to form English sentences quickly and without stress. Quickly and without stress. Okay, let's break that down. The quickly part seems obvious. You're doing it in real time as you live your life.
Right.
But the without stress part, that seems really important. What stress is it removing?
Well, it's removing the stress of interaction. The source implies that the stress comes because you're not in a conversation where someone is, waiting for your response, or where you might feel judged if you hesitate or make a mistake.
The performance pressure.
Exactly. You're practicing in a completely safe, low-pressure bubble. It's just you. You can stumble, you can correct yourself, you can pause if you need to think. Nobody cares.
That makes a huge amount of sense. The usual anxiety around speaking often comes from that interaction, the need to respond appropriately and quickly and, well, correctly. So by taking the other person out of the equation, you remove that pressure. And if you're constantly narrating your actions, even simple ones like, okay, opening the fridge now, looking for milk, your brain is getting continuous, low-stakes practice in pulling up English words and sentence structures that relate to common thoughts and situations.
It's like building muscle memory for your brain's English pathways.
Yeah. It should become more automatic over time, right? Less conscious effort involved.
That's the goal. It's building fluency through repetition, but repetition in a meaningful, functional context. You're essentially creating this constant stream of production practice for yourself.
Like training wheels for thinking directly in English.
That's a great way to put it. You're keeping the English engine idling or even running at low speed, constantly associating your thoughts and actions directly with English words and phrases, hopefully without needing that translation step.
Okay, let's dig just a little deeper here then. How exactly does narrating those simple everyday actions, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, how does that specifically help achieve the goal of thinking directly in English like the source claims?
Well, it forces the bypass of translation through sheer repetition and that immediate association. So when you do the action, let's say you pick up your phone and you immediately say out loud, I'm picking up my phone, you are forging a direct link between that action or the concept of it and the English phrase.
Okay.
You're actively trying not to think of the word for phone in your native language, then the verb pick up, and then constructing the English sentence in your head first. You're aiming for the English output to be the immediate response to the thought or the action itself.
So the simplicity is key because it makes that immediate output easier.
Exactly. The simplicity of the actions makes it manageable to do this quickly, again and again, reinforcing that direct link repeatedly throughout your entire day. Over time, this consistent practice should weaken the ingrained habit of translating and strengthen the habit of thinking and speaking in English more simultaneously.
And what about that stress aspect again? The source says it helps you form sentences quickly and without stress. What specific kinds of stress does talking to yourself help avoid?
I think the primary stress it avoids is performance anxiety, and also the cognitive load, the mental effort that comes with processing and translating in real time when you're actually talking to someone.
Right, the multitasking.
Yeah, when you're in a conversation, there's pressure, right? You have to
Yeah.
understand what they said immediately. You need to formulate a response quickly. You're trying to make it grammatically okay and sound reasonably natural, all while maybe worrying about your pronunciation.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is. It's stressful. So talking to yourself removes the pressure of needing to be understood by someone else, the pressure of reacting instantly, and crucially, the fear of making mistakes in front of someone.
You're your only audience.
Exactly. You can pause if you need to. You can rephrase something. You can correct yourself or not without any external judgment. And the source implies that this lack of external pressure makes it much easier for your brain to just focus solely on the task at hand, forming and speaking English sentences. That facilitates the quick formation it mentions.
So it's like creating this private little sandbox, a low-pressure zone, to just build that fundamental skill of spitting out sentences quickly. It really does sound like a very accessible starting point, based on what this source says.
Absolutely. It needs basically no resources beyond yourself and your own daily life, and it directly targets that really crucial step of getting your brain to operate in English.
Okay, so moving on from that, simple but powerful technique of talking to yourself. The source presents another method, one it labels as particularly powerful.
Ah, yes, the voice recording technique. This one leverages technology that, most of us carry around in our pockets every single day, our phones.
Right. Hit record and talk.
Pretty much. And the source really emphasizes its value because it allows you to hear your mistakes and improve pronunciation.
Which is something, let's face it, we're often completely unaware of when we're just speaking normally. We don't hear ourselves the way others do.
Precisely. The source makes a really insightful point there. It says that many learners don't realize how they sound until they listen to themselves. Our internal perception, how we think we sound, our own voice and how we speak, it's often quite different from the external reality.
Like hearing your voice on an answering machine for the first time. That shock.
Exactly like that. Recording yourself speaking English lets you gain that more objective perspective. And once you have that recording, the source advises that you can then sit down and analyze your pronunciation, grammar, and fluency.
Okay, so it's like you get to be your own language coach, reviewing your own performance tape after the game.
That's a good analogy. And the steps the source outlines for doing this seem very practical, very straightforward.
What are they?
Well, first you obviously need something to talk about. The source recommends starting with a simple topic.
Okay.
Keeping it simple, again, reduces the mental effort needed to just come up with ideas, so you can focus more on the speaking part. Examples it gives are familiar subjects like describe your favorite movie or talk about your last vacation.
Right. Things you know well, things you have opinions about, or facts ready to go in your head. Don't try to, explain nuclear fission on your first attempt.
Exactly. Stick to something you're comfortable discussing even in your native language. Makes it much easier.
Okay, topic chosen. What's next?
Once you've got your topic, the next step, according to the source, is to set a timer for 1 to 2 minutes and start speaking.
The timer. Why the timer?
Well, the timer adds a bit of structure, and it encourages you to produce a sustained piece of speech rather than just, 1 or 2 isolated sentences. It pushes you to talk continuously for a short period.
Okay, a mini speech.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the really critical part, I guess, the listening back, the analysis.
Yes. The source says, third, listen to your recording and write down any mistakes or areas for improvement. This is where you actively engage with the feedback that your own recording provides. As you listen, you're trying to pinpoint instances where maybe your pronunciation wasn't clear, or where you used incorrect grammar, or maybe just where your speech felt hesitant or unnatural. That's the fluency aspect.
This definitely requires a certain amount of self-awareness, doesn't it? Being able to spot your own errors.
It does, yeah. And it's a skill that improves with practice, just like speaking itself. The more you consistently listen critically to your own speaking, the more attuned you become to your typical error patterns and the areas that really need work. You start to recognize your own habits.
And the source adds a really fantastic bonus tip to this recording technique, comparing your recording to how a native speaker sounds.
Right. This takes the analysis up a notch. The source suggests finding, say, a video or maybe a podcast where a native speaker is discussing the same or a very similar topic to the one you just spoke about.
Okay.
Then you listen to how they speak and try to copy their style.
Copy their style. That phrase from the source is really interesting. It sounds like it means more than just repeating the words exactly.
Yeah.
Given that the focus is on analyzing pronunciation, grammar, and fluency, what do you think the source really means by style in this context?
That's a good question. While the source doesn't explicitly define style, logically, if you're analyzing your own pronunciation, grammar, and fluency, then comparing it to a native speaker's style would probably involve looking beyond just grammatical accuracy.
Yeah.
It would likely mean paying attention to things like their intonation patterns, where their voice goes up and down naturally, their rhythm and pacing, how quickly do they speak, where do they pause, how do they link words together smoothly. That's often called connected speech.
Ah, the musicality of it.
Exactly. It could also include things like word stress and sentence stress, which syllables or words do they emphasize to convey meaning, and maybe even picking up on common natural expressions or ways they link ideas that make their speech sound smooth and, well, authentic.
So you're not just checking if you use the past tense correctly, you're also noticing the overall melody and the flow of their speech and then trying to sort of mimic that.
Precisely. You're trying to capture the natural sound and rhythm, not just the grammatical structure.
That adds a whole other layer to the practice. It's not just about being correct. It's about sounding natural and being easily understood. So stepping back a bit, why is just hearing yourself speak so crucial for improvement, according to this source? Why is that recording step so vital?
Well, the source's main point seems to be that our self-perception, how we think we sound, is often unreliable. We just don't know how we actually sound to other people until we hear an objective recording.
Like that answering machine effect again?
Exactly. Think about watching a video of yourself doing something you do all the time, like playing a sport or giving a presentation. You often notice little habits or awkward movements you never realized you were doing.
True.
It's the same with speaking. You might think you're pronouncing a certain sound perfectly, or that your sentence structure is fine, or that you're speaking smoothly, but listening back might suddenly reveal a consistent mispronunciation you never noticed, or an awkward grammatical pattern you keep using, or maybe frequent ums and ahs, or long pauses you weren't aware of in the heat of the moment.
So the recording gives you the raw data.
Exactly. It provides the essential objective data you need for self-correction and for targeting your practice effectively. Without hearing yourself, you're basically just guessing what needs improvement.
And how does comparing your recording to a native speaker's recording complement that self-analysis? What does it add?
Well, self-analysis helps you identify your specific deviations where you're going wrong or sounding unnatural. Comparing to a native speaker provides the target, the model.
Ah, the benchmark.
Right. It shows you not just that something sounded off in your own recording, but how it should sound to be natural and fluent. So if you notice your pronunciation of a particular word is different, listening to the native speaker gives you the correct model to imitate.
Okay.
If you notice your own speech sounds very choppy or robotic, listening to their recording shows you how they link words together, how they use intonation, how they manage pauses to create a much smoother, more natural flow. It provides a concrete benchmark for those aspects of speech that are harder to judge just based on grammar rules, things like intonation, rhythm, connected speech. It makes the abstract goal of sounding natural much more concrete by giving you an actual example to aim for and copy.
It's like having a personalized masterclass in pronunciation and natural speech flow, available whenever you hit record.
Exactly. It's active comparative learning. You take authentic input, compare it directly to your own output, and then adjust. It's a powerful cycle.
Okay, moving on to the third technique that this material details. It calls this one fun and effective.
Ah, right. The mirror speaking challenge. As the name pretty clearly suggests, this involves standing in front of a mirror and start talking in English.
All right, so we've gone from talking to the air to talking into our phones, and now we're literally having a conversation with our own reflection. This definitely takes the potential for feeling silly up another level.
It might feel that way at first, yeah. But the source immediately gives a very practical grounding by explaining the purpose. It advises you to watch your mouth, your facial expressions, and your confidence level.
Okay, watching your mouth makes sense for pronunciation, maybe. Watching facial expressions. But confidence level, that's an interesting one to watch for in a mirror. How does the source suggest you observe that?
Well, the source implies that it's about looking at the whole picture, your posture, your eye contact, even if it's with your own reflection, and how open or maybe tense your facial expressions look. Are you standing up straight, or are you kind of slumping? Are you making direct eye contact with yourself in the mirror? Does your face look relaxed and engaged, or does it look stiff and anxious? Paying attention to these nonverbal cues gives you feedback on how you actually appear when you speak, which, let's face it, is a pretty significant part of real-world communication.
Right, how you come across visually.
Exactly. And the stated outcome, the benefit of this self-observation and practice, according to the source, is that it helps you feel more comfortable speaking.
Ah, so it's partly about desensitization, like just getting used to the sight of yourself speaking English, which maybe reduces the anxiety you might feel doing it in front of actual other people.
Precisely. It's almost like a form of exposure therapy, but focused on the visual element of speaking anxiety. By practicing in front of the mirror, you start to normalize the sight of yourself communicating in English. It makes it less strange, less daunting, hopefully, when you then do it with real people.
And the source highlights what it calls the best part of this method. You become your own conversation partner.
Yes, this is where the technique moves beyond just simple narration, like talking to yourself, or reciting a pre-planned speech, like maybe in the recording. It encourages a more dynamic interaction. The source actually suggests ask yourself a question, then answer it.
Okay, so this really elevates the practice from just a monologue to more of a simulated dialogue. Does
Yeah.
it give an example?
It does a simple one, but it illustrates the point. It shows you posing a question to your reflection, like, what's your favorite food?
Okay.
And then responding as if your reflection is the other person in the conversation. Oh, I love sushi. It's delicious, and I like trying different types of rolls.
Huh. That's definitely more demanding mentally than just describing what you're doing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It requires thinking of a relevant question, holding that thought, then mentally switching gears to formulate a coherent answer, and then delivering it as if you're talking to someone.
And crucially, by doing this while watching yourself, you are also practicing those nonverbal skills that are so important for effective communication. The source lists these explicitly: eye contact, body language, and natural expression, just like in a real conversation.
Right. These are elements that just recording your voice doesn't capture at all, and simple narration doesn't necessarily focus on. Things like making eye contact, maybe using your hands naturally as you speak, having animated facial expressions that match what you're saying. These are all part of the communication package that makes someone engaging and easy to understand.
Exactly right. Communication isn't just about the words you choose and the grammar you use. It's also very much about how you deliver them. Your nonverbal cues, your body language, your facial expressions, they significantly impact how your message is actually received by the listener. So practicing maintaining eye contact, even with your reflection, using appropriate body language, and allowing for natural facial expressions helps you develop a more complete, more effective communication style overall. Watching yourself allows you to see if your nonverbals are actually lining up with your message, or if maybe they're signaling nervousness or disengagement even when you don't intend to.
It's like rehearsing the entire performance, the whole show, not just learning the lines.
That's a perfect analogy. So, digging into the implications here, how exactly does seeing yourself speak impact your comfort level based on what the source describes?
Well, the source states it pretty directly. It helps you feel more comfortable speaking. This suggests that the visual familiarity you gain just seeing yourself speaking English in this safe, non-threatening environment to the mirror, it reduces the self-consciousness and the anxiety that can often pop up when you're speaking in front of other people. You just get accustomed to the side of yourself, forming the sounds, making the necessary facial movements, maybe using gestures. It removes some of the novelty and the potential awkwardness associated with speaking a foreign language. It makes the act itself feel more normal, less intimidating over time.
It makes the unfamiliar familiar.
Yeah. And what specifically can watching your facial expressions or your body language reveal about your communication that goes beyond just the words themselves? What's the extra layer?
Well, as the source hints at by mentioning things like confidence level and natural expression, watching these elements reveals that whole layer of meaning and impact that nonverbal communication adds.
Right.
Facial expressions, for instance, they convey emotion, enthusiasm, confusion, agreement, surprise. They really color the meaning of your words. Body language, things like your posture, your gestures, how much space you seem to occupy can signal confidence or openness or nervousness or hesitation.
So you might say you're excited, but your face looks bored.
Exactly. Or you might say you're confident about an idea, but you're slumped over and avoiding eye contact with the mirror. Observing these things allows you to see if your nonverbals are actually reinforcing your verbal message, or if they're maybe detracting from it or sending mixed signals.
Okay.
It helps you practice using your body and your face consciously to communicate more effectively and naturally, maybe adding emphasis where needed, conveying the right attitude, and just making your communication more dynamic and closer to how native speakers often interact.
It sounds like a really fantastic way to integrate those visual and interactive parts of communication into your solo practice routine.
It definitely fills a gap that methods focused purely on audio might leave by concentrating on the physical and visual aspects of how you deliver your speech.
Okay, so we've covered talking to yourself for basic fluency and thinking in English, voice recording for analysis and pronunciation work, and mirror speaking for confidence and working on nonverbals. The source includes one more distinct technique in its solo practice toolkit.
Yes, the 1-minute fluency drill. This one is presented as another great method, and it's specifically designed, according to the source, to help you speak faster and think quicker in English.
Okay, so if the other methods were more about forming sentences correctly or analyzing how you sound or building confidence, this one sounds like it's purely focused on speed and spontaneity, like pushing your limits.
It is indeed. It's about output under pressure. The source describes this drill with a very specific set of instructions. First, similar to the recording technique, you choose a simple topic.
Right. Keep it easy.
Yep. The source gives the example. Talk about your daily routine. Again, pick something familiar, something you can talk about without needing to look up information or think too hard about the content itself.
Okay, got my simple topic, my daily routine. What's step 2?
Second, set a timer for 1 minute and start speaking without stopping.
Whoa. Without stopping at all.
Oh.
For a whole minute. That sounds really challenging, especially if you're not totally sure what to say next or how to phrase it perfectly.
It is challenging, and that's where the third and really crucial instruction comes in. This is what makes this drill quite unique. The source says, third, if you get stuck, don't pause. Just say anything to keep going.
Say anything. That feels wrong somehow. Like, isn't the goal to speak correctly? It sounds like it could get messy.
It does sound messy, you're right, and the source implies that the messiness is almost part of the point. The explanation it gives for why this slightly chaotic approach is actually effective is key. It says, this trains your brain to think and speak at the same time, just like in real conversations.
Ah, okay. Think and speak at the same time.
Yes. The pressure of that ticking timer, combined with the strict rule against pausing, it forces your brain to override the usual instinct to stop, think, translate, or overanalyze grammar when you hit a snag.
Right, because in a real conversation, if you pause for too long, the moment can be lost, or the other person might jump in.
Exactly. Your brain needs to be able to keep the language production flowing, even if it's not perfect.
So the say anything rule isn't really about generating brilliant or even correct content. It's more like a mechanism designed to keep the English-speaking part of your brain active and pushing forward under pressure.
That seems to be the idea.
It forces you to find some way to fill the silence and maintain the stream of speech, even if it's just using filler words like, you know, or maybe just repeating the last word you said while your brain scrambles to catch up.
Precisely. The source implies the drill's value lies in preventing that complete shutdown that often happens when learners get stuck. It trains your brain to maintain output, to keep going, even when the input or the processing is faltering a bit. For that specific minute, it prioritizes the continuity of speech over grammatical perfection or finding the absolute perfect word. It pushes you past the point where you would normally stop, hesitate, or retreat back into translating in your head.
And the source notes a pretty significant long-term benefit if you practice this drill regularly. It says that you'll notice that you start speaking more smoothly and naturally. How does that connection work?
Well, it links directly back to that mechanism of training your brain to think and speak simultaneously and to push through those difficult moments without long, awkward pauses. By doing that repeatedly, you reduce the hesitation and the sort of choppiness that can make speech sound unnatural or difficult to follow.
Okay.
You're essentially building the mental stamina and the automaticity needed for more fluid conversation. The more you practice generating continuous English output under that time pressure, the faster and more seamless the connection between your thoughts and your speech should become over time.
It sounds almost like a high-intensity interval training, HIIT workout, but for your speaking muscles. Short, intense bursts that build speed, stamina, and that ability to recover quickly when you stumble.
That's a very fitting analogy, actually. It targets a specific and really crucial aspect of fluency, the ability to produce language continuously and react quickly without freezing up or getting completely derailed by a small difficulty.
Okay, wow. So we've systematically walked through the 4 core techniques this source provides for solo speaking practice. Talking to yourself for thinking in English, voice recording for self-analysis and pronunciation, mirror speaking for confidence and nonverbals, and this 1-minute fluency drill for speed and spontaneity.
A solid toolkit.
Definitely. But the source doesn't just stop there with the how-to. It connects these individual methods to a broader and, I think, really fascinating context.
Yes, it shifts gears a bit and moves into discussing some cultural insights and overarching principles about what actually makes communication effective, particularly in English-speaking environments.
And it makes a pretty bold statement right off the bat, doesn't it? Declaring that in English-speaking cultures, confidence is key.
That's a powerful assertion, yeah. And it immediately follows that up with a point that might be quite surprising, maybe even liberating, for some learners who are hyper-focused on avoiding every single grammar mistake.
What's that?
It says, even if you make grammar mistakes, native speakers care more about how smoothly and confidently you speak.
Wow. Okay, so fluency and confidence trump perfect grammar in many situations.
That's what the source strongly suggests. It's a really critical insight, especially for learners who might feel paralyzed by the fear of making errors. The source even explicitly mentions specific countries where this emphasis is particularly noticeable, listing the US, the UK, and Australia.
Okay, major English-speaking hubs.
Right. It states that in these places, people tend to admire good communication skills overall, and they often focus more on fluency and expression than on perfect grammar.
So the message from the source isn't saying grammar doesn't matter at all.
No, not at all.
But that effective communication involves more than just ticking the grammatical boxes.
Yeah.
It's significantly about how you get your message across with confidence, with flow, with clarity.
Exactly. Fluency here in this context seems to mean the ability to communicate your ideas without excessive hesitation or stumbling. And expression likely refers to using your tone, your pace, perhaps those nonverbals we talked about, to convey your meaning effectively and maybe even engagingly. The source is highlighting that, in these cultures at least, the overall impact and the clarity of your message, especially when delivered confidently, often leaves a stronger positive impression than maybe having flawless grammar but delivering it in a very hesitant, hard-to-follow way.
And this broader perspective that the source provides, it ties back so perfectly to the solo practice techniques we just spent time discussing.
Yeah, it really does.
Every single one of those methods, talking to yourself, recording, the mirror, the drill, contributes directly to building that crucial confidence and fluency that the source says are so highly valued.
They absolutely do. It's like they're custom designed for it. Talking to yourself builds that internal ease and the speed of forming sentences. Recording helps you hear and then improve the flow and naturalness of your speech, identifying those hesitations or choppy bits. Mirror speaking directly tackles the visual aspect of speaking anxiety, building confidence in how you appear, and helping you practice using expressive nonverbals naturally. And that 1-minute drill specifically targets the speed and the continuity you need for fluent, uninterrupted speech.
So these techniques aren't just random exercises the source threw out there. They seem strategically chosen because they directly cultivate the very attributes, confidence, fluency, smooth delivery, that the source identifies as being prioritized in communication by native speakers in these major English-speaking cultures.
It certainly looks that way. There's a clear alignment between the practice methods and the communication goals highlighted.
And the source offers this really powerful validation for these solo methods too, by pointing out that native English speakers themselves often use very similar techniques to improve their own speaking skills.
Yes, this is a great piece of evidence the source brings in. It notes that many public speakers practice alone before they speak in public. Think about politicians, CEOs, academics giving lectures.
People whose job involves high-stakes speaking.
Exactly. And the actions they take to prepare. They sound remarkably familiar based on our discussion. The source says they talk to themselves in front of a mirror, record their voice, and rehearse their speech, just like we talked about today.
That's a really compelling point. If individuals whose entire profession often revolves around effective public communication use these exact same solo techniques to polish their delivery, their clarity, their confidence, then these methods must be genuinely effective tools for refining and improving spoken language, regardless of whether you're a learner or a native speaker preparing for something important.
It completely dismantles any lingering feeling that practicing alone is somehow just a lesser alternative, something you only do when you can't find a real partner.
Right.
The source effectively reframes it. Solo practice becomes a legitimate, proven method for skill development, a strategy that even highly proficient speakers utilize to hone their craft.
The conclusion the source draws from this is pretty powerful then. So don't feel weird about practicing alone. It's actually a technique that even native speakers use to improve their speaking skills.
It shifts the whole perception, doesn't it? Solo practice isn't presented as a compromise. It's positioned as a strategic choice, a tool used by successful communicators.
Yeah, it really empowers the learner, I think. It validates their independent efforts and connects what they're doing in private to practices used at a very high level of communication.
Absolutely.
So let's just reflect for a moment on the implications of these broader insights from the source. How does knowing about this cultural emphasis, this value placed on confidence and fluency, make these solo practice techniques particularly relevant and maybe even more motivating for learners?
Well, according to the source's perspective, it provides a clearer, perhaps more achievable target for your practice. Instead of solely striving for this abstract, often intimidating goal of grammatical perfection.
Which can lead to freezing up.
Exactly, which can lead to hesitation and fear of speaking. Learners can instead focus on building skills like speaking smoothly, reducing those long pauses, expressing themselves clearly and confidently, skills that they now know, based on the source, are highly valued and actually noticed by native speakers. And the solo techniques we discussed provide direct, practical pathways to developing exactly those skills. Knowing that these are the qualities that often make a positive first impression can really motivate learners to embrace techniques that build confidence and flow, even if, as the source implies, it means temporarily allowing for occasional grammar slips. Native speakers are often quite forgiving of those, the source suggests, especially when the overall communication is smooth and confident.
It encourages a more pragmatic approach, doesn't it? Focused on effective connection and getting your message across, rather than just clinical correctness above all else.
Exactly. It helps align your practice methods with what the source describes as real-world communication priorities in those specific cultural contexts.
And specifically, why might knowing that native speakers like those public speakers mentioned use similar solo practice methods be so motivating for a learner? What does that knowledge do?
I think it validates the methods themselves, and perhaps more importantly, it validates the learner's effort. If public speakers, who are essentially professional native communicators, are using mirror practice and recording themselves and doing solo rehearsals,
Right.
it elevates these activities.
Yeah.
They're no longer just something you feel you have to do because you don't have a partner. They become a recognized, effective strategy for improving speaking skills used by experts.
It takes away the weirdness factor the source mentioned.
Completely. This knowledge can significantly reduce any feelings of awkwardness or maybe inadequacy that someone might associate with talking to themselves or practicing alone. It positions the learner on a path that's shared by successful speakers, reinforcing the idea that their independent practice is a valid, legitimate, and potentially powerful way to make real progress.
It transforms solo practice from maybe feeling like a remedial activity into feeling more like a professional development activity, something serious speakers do.
Exactly. It lends credibility and serious purpose to the effort involved.
So we've certainly covered quite a bit from the source material today. It's been really insightful. We started by acknowledging that very real challenge, that feeling of being limited in your speaking practice when you don't have a partner handy.
A common starting point.
Definitely. And then we dove deep into the source's counter-argument, which turned out to be packed with practical solutions. We explored those 4 specific, actionable techniques, talking to yourself to train direct English thinking,
Getting the brain wired right.
voice recording to analyze and improve pronunciation and flow,
Hearing yourself objectively.
mirror speaking to build that visual confidence and practice nonverbals,
The whole communication package.
and that 1-minute fluency drill to boost speed and spontaneity under pressure.
The speaking workout.
Yeah. And we discussed the why and the how for each, using the source's examples and trying to elaborate on the mechanisms the source suggested were at play.
And importantly, we didn't just start at the techniques.
No, we then connected these methods to the broader context the source provides, understanding that high value, it says, is placed on confidence and fluency in major English-speaking cultures.
A key cultural insight.
And hopefully gaining some motivation from the fact that even native speakers employ similar solo practice techniques to refine their own skills.
We really have unpacked the core message of this source, I think. That you absolutely can achieve significant improvement in your spoken English independently. You don't have to wait.
Right.
The material provides a clear framework offering these concrete methods that target key aspects of fluency and confidence aspects, which, as the source highlights, are highly valued in real-world English communication.
And the wonderful thing is, based on this deep dive into the source, you, our listener, now have a comprehensive set of specific techniques that you can start trying out, maybe even today. You have the makings of a flexible plan to practice speaking anytime, anywhere, even when you're the only English speaker in the room. You're no longer necessarily dependent on finding that perfect partner. The power to practice is really in your own hands, guided by these methods the source lays out.
This material really does empower the learner, I feel. It demonstrates that perhaps the most crucial resource for improving your speaking may just be yourself, as long as you're armed with the right techniques and the motivation to use them.
So let's end today with a thought to maybe carry with you, something based directly on this source's perspective that we've explored.
Okay.
If, as this source strongly suggests, confidence and fluent expression are valued so highly by native speakers in many contexts, sometimes even more than perfect grammar, how does that potentially shift your perspective on making mistakes when you speak?
That's a great question to ponder. That point from the source about the cultural emphasis, it could be quite profound for many learners, especially those who've been trained, maybe in school, to avoid errors at all costs.
Right, where every mistake felt like a failure.
Exactly. So maybe consider, is the fear of grammatical inaccuracy actually holding you back from practicing the very fluency and confidence that this source says are so impactful and valued?
Perhaps the underlying lesson from this material is almost like permission. Permission to be a bit bolder, to embrace communication as this dynamic process where flow and connection matter immensely, right alongside trying to be correct.
It certainly provides a compelling reason to really focus on developing that comfortable, smooth delivery, the kind of delivery that these solo techniques seem specifically designed to cultivate.
So take these insights from our deep dive into this source. Maybe choose just 1 or 2 of the methods we talk about, talking to yourself while you make coffee, recording your voice on your phone, challenging yourself in the mirror for a minute, or attempting that 1-minute fluency drill, and just try them. Try them consistently for a little while.
Find what resonates.
Yeah, see which ones you connect with, which ones feel helpful, and then try to make them a regular, non-negotiable part of your ongoing English learning journey.
Consistency really is key here. As the source implies through its description of how effective these practices are, it's the regular application day in, day out that will lead to that noticeable improvement in your fluency and your confidence over time.
Keep talking, keep practicing, and enjoy the learning journey with these powerful solo techniques.